Behind every success story, there is a long line of triumphs and defeats that remain hidden from others. These stories get condensed into journeys that minimize the struggle and wrap up with a happy ending. But we know that's not how life works. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about the challenges that Mark's guest faced and how they overcame adversity. Now, here is your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome back to From the Ashes. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay. I'm sitting here with Jacob Winkler. I'm so happy, Jacob, to have you on the show. We've known each other through the group scene that gets brought up on the show quite a bit. The AGPA, the Center for Group Studies over in New York. I think we first met in that area. And I'm excited to learn more about you through this and to see kind of the man behind the therapy mask, which I think is always of interest to our listeners to see therapists are people too, you know.
Thank you so much, Mark. I smiled even as you said the man behind the mask, because I think and assume part of what, when you mentioned the group scene, that when we know each other, is this, process group for therapists. My thought about it is that you know me from there in a pretty human way. It's really exciting to be here with you and to have a chance to talk more about that.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about that because I think we've connected on enjoying like Jungian psychology and mythology, working with archetypes and doing some of the men's work. And I think I'm really looking forward to, adding more breadth to our relationship. Something that I talk about with some of the other NGPA people, I'm curious what you think about this, is that in the group scene, it's a lot of depth. It's a lot of like going in, there's a lot of regression, which for our listeners means like kind of acting out childlike impulses. You know, it's a lot of like emotional intensity, but it lacks a lot of context, because you're just kind of dropped into it. You're like parachuted in behind enemy lines and you have to just like go. So I've enjoyed doing these interviews with my AGPA buddies because I get all this context that I might have learned about you had we been in any other circumstance, right?
That's such a good point. I actually got goosebumps as you said it, because it's so easy to forget and to then not appreciate how hungry I am for that too. To like just share more like ideas and things that we've confronted and thought about, stories and history, and not just the kind of how squishy are you in the moment, right? So I don't know. I mean, I actually have an idea of how to start, because so you picked From the Ashes, right, for your podcast, and I was thinking about that. Obviously the imagery of the phoenix, and I have to admit I haven't listened to your other recordings. I'd like to, but I think I noticed like the coming up in me as I was thinking about this is like there's on one hand the desire to be impressive and to shine, and I was thinking about like my like From the Ashes story. I think so much is about recovering from a kind of Icarus mentality, and that's really been like a big story for me. Should I keep going, or do you want to?
Oh, no, this is great. Yeah, just dive right in. Yeah, let people know.
So I grew up in a secular Jewish family, and then got really into meditation and mysticism and Eastern philosophy that was translated, and I started meditating a lot, and I left college because I wanted to find God and the community that was about that. I didn't want to work so hard. I was kind of intimidated about the world of work and just being a grown-up, and I had this hope that I could find an alternative way of life. wow, it's like a big story. Part of that, I mean, maybe I'll come back to the detours along the way, but one of the where I really ended up for a while was uh, in Israel and becoming Orthodox Jewish,
Mhm.
which was such a dramatic and radical change. Uh, and then I I was in that world for several years. I married, I had children, and eventually grew out of it. And
Well, hold on, can I slow down for a
yeah,
moment?
yeah, I don't know how to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
help me
like
tell
I,
the story.
yeah. Well, I'm just curious. I think I met you towards the end of that, right? Because I remember meeting your wife. I think she also went to CGS. But I'm so curious about, yeah, just walk us through like the decision to join the Orthodox Jewish community, about what that was like, especially being someone that wasn't raised in it.
Right.
Our
So
listeners know, and I think like I'm Jewish, secular, Reform. So I have some familiarity, but the Orthodox community is a whole nother thing.
yeah, I mean, I grew up with like almost no awareness of of the different of orthodoxy certainly. And what happened was I had this kind of experience while I was in college. I was meditating every day. I was doing Aikido, uh, and I I had this sense of like, well, what if I just kind of followed whatever kind of intuitive ideas God put in my mind. It was not, I don't think, very grounded, but it was. Uh, there was a degree of. I also hesitate to say that it was like completely like manic. It was somewhere in between grounded and manic. But so it was this sense of being led that came over me, or that was like, oh, this is really there's something to this. And so I would how did I know what the thing was to lead me? It was kind of like a sense of excitement and inspiration, and so I would just be like an openness to, well, what's next. And I remember I someone mentioned the Kripalu Yoga Institute in Massachusetts, I think, and I went there. It was like, oh, that sounds good. I'll go there. And then I was in the bookstore of their yoga. I was doing their volunteer program, and I was reading books by Ken Wilber and really liking them. And turned the back of it and it's like, oh, he's in Boulder and he's Europa. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go there. That's the next stop. And I was in Europa for a little while, and I was getting frustrated with it. Still felt too structured and too just mainstream. I didn't really know what I was searching for. And I decided to leave there and kind of wander around. And at the same time, kind of strangely, coincidentally, strangely, my brother graduated high school and decided to do a secular year in Israel in between before going to college. And so while I was wandering around, he said, "Well, why don't you wander around Israel and we'll be there together." And then while we were there, we both came in contact with these this organization. There are a few of them, but that are sort of like Jewish missionary organizations that try to find confused young Jewish people and convince them to become Orthodox. And they're very good at it.
Interesting.
And we were convinced. I could say more about the actual like the things that spoke to me in that process. Um, I remember seeing, so the Orthodox Jewish, one of the things is they have big families, and they on Shabbat you don't have devices. This was really before phones so much anyway, but it creates it gave this impression of like this wholesome, loving, big family. And that really spoke to me of like, oh, like I want that. I want to be part of that. And then um, there's this like, if you're a fundamentalist, you have this real clarity, like I know what the right way is. I know what the right thing is. And that was just intoxicating for me.
Yeah.
Very easy for me to enjoy feeling self-righteous. And this was like just a carte blanche, like
Yeah. You know what the
yeah,
way is, right? Like you have the
exactly.
way. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I think it was those two things combined with sort of the standard arguments that they make, which, you're kind of in your 20s and you're more meditating than thinking critically anyway. So I succumbed to those. And the three of those together, plus a sense of this is continuing this kind of God's leading me. So I was just like, okay, well, God's leading me. And just dove in. And I went to yeshiva, it's kind of like being at a meditation retreat or being in a monastery. It's just very, very, it's like religion all day long. Prayer, study, abstinence, like, yeah, and it's preparation for Jewish living, Orthodox Jewish living, for getting married through the dating world, the matchmaking world. Yeah, so I was doing that. I did that for 3 years before starting the matchmaking. Oh, it's like it's where I connect to the from the ashes part is just there was so much like, oh, everything will be fine and this is great, and no heaviness. That's where I feel like the Icarus, and like, and I'm I have so much to be grateful for in my life now, and we'll probably get to some of that. But like, there's I'm so much more in touch now with the cost of all of that,
Yeah.
and the price I paid not realizing it, and that's where I really connect to this. You soar and then you crash, and then you come out again and dust yourself off. But
Yeah, when I can see the intoxication, right? I mean, it's in the moment, you're just like, this is my path. I am, child of God or whatever your story was, right? Of like, I'm just doing it. And I didn't know you went to Naropa or you spent time in Naropa. That's the grad school I went to. And I did 3 years there. And it's very similar. Where like when I was in that bubble, I was like, this is where I need to be. And that's coupled with intense emotional and intense religious and spiritual experiences I was having regularly of like, whoa, and belonging. I mean, even though I do think there are some significant issues with the Naropa community and the Shambhala community, at the time, I was blind too. I was just like, whoa, I found my people. I found my tribe. Like these people see me, they get me. I'm like crying on a regular basis. I'm meditating. I'm eating cleaner than I ever did. I'm doing yoga. I mean, I'm just like feeling great. Where other parts of my life, I can, in retrospect, maybe you can relate with this, like the blinders were like starting to come on to like other parts of life. Was that part of your experience or what happened?
Well, I mean, I wish I could say the blinders came on gradually. My felt sense is that I was really kind of blind going in.
Yeah.
And that's one of the kind of the graces of the story is that, like, I do feel like who knows where I would have ended up. Like I might have ended up in some ashram in India or something. And I do feel like I got very valuable, all kinds of things. Well, children, but like qualities for myself, experiences. And oh man, no, yeah, that's like so scary that to really live with that, like that fear of being blind again. Wow, yeah, I can just feel that. Like that's really motivates a lot of my work in therapy, personally, and then just what I'm trying to do with the people I work with is like I have a sense now of how terrifying it is to be blind, somewhat blind.
Yeah.
And I have this now inner like kind of progressive intersectional critic inside of me saying like, well, don't use blind because it's not necessarily terrifying for actually blind people, but the sense of I don't want to see what's important, and therefore I'm willing to focus on what appeals to me is very scary for me.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I want to bookmark that for a moment, and I want to keep walking through the story of the matchmaking process and what that was like. I do want to go back to this blind
yeah,
thing.
well, that is crazy. Yeah. I mean, wow. So the way that worked for me, so I was in a yeshiva with a bunch of what's called Balei Tshuva, which means they start out, they're not Orthodox and they become Orthodox. And the way, and you're not having sex, you're not masturbating, you're not even supposed to like look or talk to women before you're getting ready to date. And then you say you're ready to date and your rabbi agrees, maybe there's some negotiation, but okay, and then you start the dating process. You meet a matchmaker who probably often is kind of an older woman who's got a big Rolodex. And you tell her what kind of religious life you want to lead. But it's pretty like there are some really clear right answers.
Yeah. It's
like,
not a survey, it's a quiz, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's really, that's right. Like it's really like a job interview in a way.
Yeah.
Where like, you're prepped to know what to say and what not to talk about. And then based on what you say, she's going to suggest matches for you. Then you get a chance to say, okay, I'll go with this match. Sure, I'll check it out. And then the other person gets the same chance. And then you meet in a hotel lobby, and you get a glass of water each.
Really?
I don't think you can even get a soda. Maybe you get a soda. You're sitting in this hotel lobby. It's public space, and from the first date, you're trying to figure out, are you the right person to get married to?
Right. It goes all the way to like the end game, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm curious with this matchmaking process, before we go into our break here, of like, if it's a quiz and everyone's answering the same right answers, how is that effective at all, right? If everyone's trying to answer the same, how do they get a sense of who's actually compatible? Or maybe the answer is they don't. Maybe it's just a crapshoot.
Well, it's a really good question, and we'll come back to that one. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So we'll wrap up here. I want to hear more about the story, more about kind of how you were moving through that, and yeah, I think it's great, and how you eventually got out of it. So if you're listening, hang on there, and we'll see you on the other side of the commercial break.
Enjoying our shows and can't get enough of us? Follow us on Instagram at Voice America Talk Radio and see what we're cooking up for you.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit marc-azoulay.teachable.com. That's Marc, MARC-Azoulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Marc Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to the show. I'm sitting here with Jacob Winkler, and we're talking about a topic that I love talking about. It's like belonging, feeling lost, seeking, whether it be spiritual or seeking family. It's a big part of my story. And I want to bring it back to you, Jacob, where you talk about being in the Orthodox Jewish community and doing this matchmaking process. And I have to imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but I have to imagine that you have this need for belonging. Plus, you haven't, talked to a woman or looked at a woman in 3 years. So I'm curious what it's like for you to all of a sudden be across the table, and you're in the lobby with a glass of water with this woman that, or these women that could be your wife, right? Instead, the intention was that like, this is your life partner. This is the mother of your children. That's like 0 to 100 so fast, right?
That's right. And you reminded me, like, oh my God, if you think about just being a regular person in the secular world, it brings up a lot to go approach someone that you're interested in and say hi, and to say, and ask them something, to express your interest, all the fear of like rejection and all of that. This is like, I just, remembering it like amps that up so much, because, first you have this interview with the matchmaker, and yeah, like, she's like the gatekeeper. Like, are you going to get access? Are you suitable? And then, okay, you meet this young woman who's kind of in the same position of like, just sort of been prepped for this goal, but has, both of us, so little sense of who we are really, and so much like kind of pressure to find the person and build that family. Kind of even forgot where we were going with that, but like, you're sitting there and yeah, it's really intense, really, really awkward. And you don't know how it goes. You end the meeting, and then you each speak to your respective people and speak to the matchmakers separately, and then decide if you want to meet again without talking to each other. That's the way I did it. There are slight modifications, but so it's so anxiety provoking.
Oh yeah.
But the one thing that's good about it is you're supposed to decide quickly. I don't know if that's good about it actually, but you don't have to sit with the not knowing for that long, because you're supposed to know within a week or so. You should know, are you meeting again? A few days, okay. And then you meet again, and it's pretty similar. Maybe you go for a walk in a public space for the second date. And by like the third or fourth, fifth date, you should have clarity about, are you getting engaged or not?
Really?
If you're not getting engaged, probably you should move on. And how the hell are you supposed to know? Well, the encouragement that I remember getting was, if there's no huge red light, there's no huge sign of no, then just say yes. So, so like, part of where I am now is like, I don't want to be rejecting of traditions or perspectives, because I've done a lot of that. So I'm like, I want to be like, okay, there's a kernel of wisdom here to like, okay, there's nothing hugely wrong, so let me say yes. I think there's wisdom as far as modern dating. There's something about that that's useful. But oh my God, Mark, I was engaged 3 times and almost engaged 2 other times, and I saw a total of 13 women in that year, I think, pretty sure. So
that is wild. And
yeah,
that's wild. Yeah.
It was such a emotional trip. Just yeah. I mean, I almost wonder if you just get married just to not be doing that
just
anymore.
To end it.
Yeah.
Just to end that craziness. Yeah.
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 So yeah, I mean, I eventually met someone where we got to the wedding, um, and started a family. Uh, and so like, but we were not, I mean, I was part of what I was bringing to this, and you mentioned it, is like I was looking for the mother of my children, um, not necessarily the partner for me. I was pretty split about that. I wasn't thinking so much, and I was encouraged not to think, who are you going to enjoy life with and feel challenged by in the most enriching way. So my ex, she is and was like a great mom, but we were so poorly matched as far as being partners for each other. And I think that is common. You asked like how does the system work? Like, I mean, maybe someone who had more confidence would be more themselves in the whole process. I was really trying to live up to an ideal that I had absorbed from the environment. And I guess, I mean, part of what I was communicating that was true about me was like my passion to live up to an ideal. but it was not as full a picture as maybe other people are able to do in that system. So
yeah, well, and you just came out of 3 years of intensive religious training, so I'd have to imagine that was your life, right?
Oh,
was
it
trying
totally
to live up
was.
to this ideal.
I
right?
mean,
you weren't developing other passions or hobbies or interests, right? Like you were just in the yeshiva, just grinding, right?
Right, absolutely. And but even among the people in yeshiva, I was the one who was trying to do extra.
Yeah. Overachiever. Yeah.
I was the overachiever. Yeah. And the other thing that happened is, I had entered yeshiva from this very kind of new agey, interested in everything, religious, philosophical place. I really kind of filtered that in preparation for the dating process. And then once I was married, that could start to come out again more. And I had one mentor who was really important because he was also a Baal Tshuva. He was also had come to the faith as a teenager, well, not even like a young adult, and had that same quest for sort of mystical knowledge and experience. And he really had kind of he'd done the whole thing. He'd created a family. He was living in Jerusalem, and he'd really studied with a lot of the Jewish mystics. But he felt like it had kind of dead ended. My sense of things, and therefore he actually was really affirming in my questioning in a way that a lot of the other people were totally threatened by it. And I remember distinctly having this thought of like, is the Dalai Lama more forgiving than God? Or getting ready for Yom Kippur, kind of studying the various ways that I've sinned, trying to like get into this. And then like you have to ask for forgiveness. I was wondering about that. Like, is the Dalai Lama, is the Buddha more forgiving than God? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And so it was these sorts of questions that started to take on more energy for me. And then I got re-exposed to this spiritual teacher, David Hawkins. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with the details.
Yeah. So it's almost like, in some ways, like out of the frying pan into the fire. Like his whole premise, I do feel kind of embarrassed to say in a way, is that you can hold out your arm, and based on the strength of your arm, whether it resists being pushed down or whether it goes down when someone pushes it, determine the absolute truth of any idea.
Okay, yes, this is ringing some bells.
Yeah. Hopefully, warning bells.
Yeah, because it uses for food sensitivities and like all kinds of stuff too. Yeah, this technique. Right. Yeah.
So I, for some reason, when I reread his books, because I'd seen them before in Boulder, but I reread them, and I had this same kind of felt sense experience of, oh, this is the truth now. And there's a lot of beautiful kind of mystical teaching and language in his books, but the one thing that he bases it all on is complete nonsense.
It's snake oil. Yeah.
Snake oil has been completely debunked. Yeah. But I became a true believer of Dr. Hawkins. And of course my Orthodox wife was totally distressed by this. We moved back to the States at this time. And for many years, I'm just trying to, I don't know, live in two worlds. Part of this Orthodox family, but be inspired by this New Agey guru. And then his main student, who was actually entrusted by him to write his biography, comes out with this expose about how, when he studied the documents that Dr. Hawkins gave him for the project, he realized, wait a second, the research doesn't fit. The testimonials are false, and he wrote a whole book on it. And so that rocked my world again, where I'm like, oh, again, I've completely dove into a world that that means that I'm not in touch with the reality of things. And in his critique, Scott Jeffries, the author, he talked about Carl Jung and the idea of wholeness. That's what helped bring me out of the spiritual seeking in the same way that I was in before. That was just kind of looking for the light, looking for the bliss, and brought me to the world of therapy, which was looking for light and dark, wholeness. There's a lot to say.
No, it's great though. Okay. So I think that's really interesting. And I want to hear more about that, right? Of moving from this right and wrong, black and white way of thinking, a more dogmatic, I would say, way of thinking, right? Whether it be Orthodox Judaism or be the, Dr. Hawkins stuff, into, I think, holding, which has been a big part of me for therapy, is holding, paradoxical truths, holding multiple things at the same time, creating much more kind of panoramic awareness. Was that your experience too, of breaking out of that kind of good versus evil narrative?
Yes, completely. That I love knowing what is good and what is bad, what is evil, and identifying with what is good. That's a very safe, seemingly safe, comfortable place to be. And it's been, but very dangerous, very, very dangerous place. And so it's been so liberating to be constantly looking for, well, what's not included in this narrative? What am I not wanting to think about, as I tell myself this story? And where's the truth in the opposite, in the other?
Yeah.
that's been really refreshing.
Yeah, I think it's critical. I mean, I know you know this. I'm saying this for our listeners too. It's like shadow work is something that, we talk about a fair amount, which is, your shadow is the part of yourself that you disconnect from. And it's not the evil part, right? It could be, for some people, their shadow could be tenderness or compassion or vulnerability or feeling weak or feeling scared, right? But it's those parts that we cut off to keep this ideal, this ego alive. And it sounds like you were building that really big bag of shadow, right? In these kind of good versus evil, red versus blue, Empire versus Rebellion story, right?
Exactly.
There wasn't a lot of gray.
Right. Hey, that's exactly right. And that's the, again, where I connect to the From the Ashes bit, where it's like the flight of Icarus involves a big bag of shadow, as you say, and then you crash down and you have to like see it and be in it. But that's such a better place to be, I would say. I'm sorry. Yeah.
It is. I think it is. So far. We're going to move to our final commercial break here. When we come back, I want to hear more about, how you unwound your life, right? I mean, how you kind of, got out of the marriage, how you, got out of the orthodoxy and, create a new life for yourself now.
That sounds great.
So if you're listening and you're connecting, definitely tune in and share it on social media, like it, send it to people. This is a really powerful story, and I think it resonates with a lot of our listeners.
Enjoying our shows and can't get enough of us? Follow us on Instagram at Voice America Talk Radio and see what we're cooking up for you.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome to our final segment. We're in the From the Ashes part, So I'm curious, Jacob, as you're kind of getting out of the orthodoxy, as you're kind of, I'd imagine, questioning your marriage, questioning your decisions, what did that look like? How did you kind of unravel your life and start to rebuild it?
Right. Well, we were actually encouraged to divorce from the Orthodox mentors we had once I started saying things that were too heretical. But we both were kind of too stubborn. And for me at least, part of that was like I couldn't tolerate the shame I imagined about getting divorced and the fear of it. And so it was just, I wouldn't really allow that as an option. And so, I was going through the motions, living in New Jersey, doing less and less. And then as I was doing therapy, I became more willing to feel things that I was not for most of my life. To be angry, to grieve, to feel shame, to feel helpless. So I was really like becoming much more of a human in this. And I started with Jungian analysis because I was inspired by the like Jung is kind of adjacent to the spiritual quest in a way, I would say. And so that felt really like a good fit. Okay, if I'm not going to be trying to attain enlightenment, then at least I will be doing the Jungian project. And then I also discovered the group world, and that felt like, man, there's like little side stories here that I may not get into. Like I was hoping I had the same kind of hoped for community in the Jungian world. I was kind of disappointed with that. Came to the group world. It was like, oh, maybe now this is finally my tribe. So far, I don't think I'm that disappointed, but but that was part of it. And the group therapy really helped me connect to my feelings and to live them and express them in a way that an individual was happening in a very different way. And so I really think it was in group that I first felt like, oh, I can actually be angry with someone in a constructive way without fearing like I'm destroying them, and without getting destroyed myself. And also I can express my desire and my affection and my care, my love better, clearer. And I think eventually, as far as leaving the marriage, eventually I just kind of became strong enough and clear enough that I wanted to raise my kids more authentically, not teach them that they should be observant, even as I was less and less. And I felt finally deserving of seeking a partner that I would really love and feel that kind of romantic connection with. And so that was, I mean, that was sort of, that culminated in getting divorced. And I feel kind of astoundingly lucky in this, but very shortly after getting divorced, I had one long-term relationship, and then I met my wife now just last year. And I think it's been a direct result of the work of being able to what we were saying before, like be light and dark, feel my own darkness rather than that was part of my first marriage. Lasted, I think, almost 10 years, maybe a little more, something like that, about 10 years. And so much of it was I did not want to think of myself as nasty, mean, cruel, vicious, irritable, impatient, all of these things. And of course, I am all of those things because we're all everything. But so part of why it lasted so long was I wasn't really fighting for what was important to me. And one of the gifts from therapy, especially the group therapy, is that I now feel like I can fight for what's important to me. And that's made, I think it's made it much easier to find someone who I'm really excited to be with most of the time, and like confident about the fighting, when it's frustrating and miserable, like in a way that it's not despairing to the same extent or something. It's like, okay, we'll get through this. It's going to be, I can be ugly too, and that's okay. And I can then tolerate her ugliness too at times.
It's not so personal, right?
It's not like a existential pronouncement.
Right.
Like,
it doesn't
I'm
define
bad.
who you are as a person, right? Like
Right.
I am a bad husband or a cruel partner or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's easy as a child to think that, like, you see your parents fight and you think, oh, that's just horrible. I'm not going to be like that at all. And that's kind of how you start putting stuff in your shadow. Like, I don't, versus being like, that's being a human. That's two people, trying to figure out this really hard thing.
Yeah, I remember early in my career, maybe it's the point of like coming from Naropa and coming from this big like spiritual materialism thing, which for our listeners that essentially means like, and I felt this thinking that I was better than other people because I had a spiritual practice and I was like more pure or more enlightened or more everything, right? More present, better person, right? Like a lot of superiority. I remember hanging out with these group people. They're talking about these modern analysts, right? And just like having a talk over like a drink, and they're talking about how like jealous they are of other people and how much they hate other people and how they have fantasies of like killing people, And I'm like, and I'm just sitting there, I'm like, these are like some demons. Like these are like the nastiest, craziest people I've ever seen. And they call themselves like therapists that were supposed to be, get my idea that they're like these enlightened, helping, Mother Teresa figures. And it's like,
yep.
This is what people are talking about. And, now I realize, no, they were just kind of owning their entire experience rather than trying to perform and be like the best therapist or the best Buddhist or the best, human or whatever it is.
Yep.
And that was scary for me, scary. And then ultimately refreshing, but in the beginning, like very terrifying of like, oh shit, there's a lot more here.
I love what you just said. I don't remember connecting to the fear when I first was exposed to it. Maybe it was there, but I just didn't allow myself to feel it. But I do remember being like, oh my God, this is so different. And what you described, the spiritual materialism, I mean, like that's something that I'm so allergic to now. This sense of, from whatever vantage point I've found, have a sense that I'm better than others. Now, I'm sure I'm guilty of this. Like I'm allergic to it because it's such a temptation for me. But it's also something you mentioned, red, blue earlier. Like I've always, like, I really long for being able to like see our various political parts as like sides of the brain, like right and left sides of the brain, to be like real diversity is like this person who I'm terrified of, that their vision of America or the world or whatever is terrifying to me, and I'm still going to assume that there's something of wisdom in where they're coming from, and I'm going to walk forward towards them with the terror and not hide it, not hide the fact that, look, I find this terrifying, and here's I want to tell you more, but to have this weird trust that there's something incredibly important about, embracing might be strong, although that, but like reaching for that which is terrifying, especially in the political other, and trying to dislodge myself from the place of self-righteousness.
Yeah, I love that you said that. It makes me think of a idea I think popularized by Jordan Peterson, where he talks about of the way that the political system works, in his mind, what makes it strong is the tension between multiple viewpoints, and like this kind of tensile strength that you can see like in any kind of organic system, rather than a homogenous strength, right? Which is everybody believing and thinking the same idea, whether that be on either side of the political spectrum. I don't think it actually matters, but I think like it's like the difference, healthy, if possible, conflict resolution, right? Debate, like it's the back and forth that I think creates real strength. Whereas homogeny might feel really good, but I think quickly can become like fascism, right? Of like everybody thinks and feels and believes the same way, or it can become, I won't use this word for your experience, but I know from my Naropa experience, like cult, right?
Totally. It's totally my experience multiple times.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Of like this cult mentality of like, we all are in lockstep and we all believe the same thing. And while, like you said, that might feel safe, I think it's incredibly dangerous. Because it creates that closed-mindedness and like a lack of flexibility, and yeah, this righteousness of like, I know the way, my way is the way, and everybody else is wrong or stupid or unenlightened or uneducated or racist or whatever, right? Like whatever the narrative is that puts other people down.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right. I that's so important. And that's one of the things so I run this workshop for therapists called Deeper in the Here and Now, which is a taste of a process group. It's really inspired by the group training where we met. It's my own attempt to do that. And when someone wants to do it, I ask them, is there anyone that you can imagine where if they were in this group, you would not want to be part of it? And that could be, their mom or a patient or a gay person or a Republican or, whoever. And that's, I usually only speak for about 15 minutes with people who want to join this thing, but that's the thing that I really want to talk about, because I think like that's the promise of the kinds of group therapy that we do, is that you can stay in dialogue with someone who really is intolerable to you, who sets you off, whether it's their politics or their personality or, whatever, and that's where you can like really grow, because there's something, I'm like aware of the time, and then I'm like noticing I'm starting to speed up because I'm like, oh, I want to get through all these things. But there's one idea that really inspired me when I first got exposed to it, and that's supposedly, like, it's called the first law of cybernetics. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
So the way I understand it is it says something like the most flexible part of the system will eventually determine the course. Mm-hmm. And what I take from that is like, the more, and this really applies with like couples therapy and being in a relationship, but like the more you can notice your habitual way of responding and try something different, the more likelihood you have of getting closer to what you want. And that's something that I really love about the work that we do, that we're helping people do that.
Yeah, I think building that psychological flexibility and that curiosity for the full breadth of life is, it's magical. We do have to wrap up here, but I am excited to have you on again to talk more about this righteousness and this kind of like lockstep situation. And I think it's something that is going to be increasingly relevant as we enter, the next election cycle. So Jacob, thank you so much for joining us. Can you let people know where they might be able to find more information about you and the work that you do and who you are?
Sure. So my website is grouptherapynj.com. Just spell it as it sounds. And I'd be happy to hear from people. I really thank you for this opportunity, Mark, and I would love to come again.
It's fantastic. It's wonderful, like learning more. There's a lot of parallels between our stories, and I think this idea of like being a spiritual seeker is also really critical of, what was lacking that made us want to do that.
Right? That's really that's a really important conversation. We could talk a lot about that. That's I think like essential. To get in touch with that pain and keep it close.
Yeah. Well, until next time, we have to wrap up here. If you're listening and you enjoy it, again, like it, share it, spread the word. These are really important conversations. And if you can relate to it in any way, it's helpful to get some feedback. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We're trying to build up our numbers there. Thank you for everyone who's done it so far. And without further ado, I'll see you next week, another episode of From the Ashes.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay on From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Meet triumph and defeat, and treat those two imposters the same.